The Agricultural Business Chamber recently held their annual Media Day in Pretoria. The theme was Searching for Green Shoots in 2023. Plaas TV spoke to a few role players after the event, so stay tuned for more on this. But first, here's Lisa with the latest agricultural news.
Communique exists to serve feed and food producers.
In the news today, after having contracted for 2 consecutive quarters, South Africa's agricultural gross value added expanded by 19.2% quarter on quarter in the third quarter of this year. According to Wandile Sihlobu of Agbiz, this improvement is underpinned by better yields of some field crops and horticulture, combined with relatively higher prices, specifically grains and oilseeds. The summer grains harvest, typically in this year's second quarter, was delayed by roughly a month and fell into the third quarter this year. According to Reuters, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador recently said that he was seeking a deal with the United States after the U.S. threatened legal action against Mexico's plan to ban genetically modified maize by 2024. This followed a meeting between Mexican officials and the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. Mexico's import ban would cause massive economic losses for Mexico's agricultural industries and citizens, and will place an unjustified burden on U.S. farmers. This will have a significant impact on the U.S.-Mexico trade relationship. U.S. farmers export about 17 million tons of maize to Mexico every year, with Mexico being one of the largest buyers of U.S. maize. En volgens die Landboumachinerievereniging is die 704 trekkereenhede wat in November verkoop is ongeveer 5% minder as die 742 eenhede wat verlede November verkoop is. Dit volg op rekord trekkerverkope in Oktober. Vir die jaar tot dusver is trekkerverkope nou ongeveer 17% meer as verlede jaar se verkope. 23 stropers is ook in November verkoop. Dit is 15 eenhede meer as die 8 wat verlede November verkoop is. Vir die jaar tot dusver is stroperverkope nou byna 38% meer as verlede jaar se verkope. Dis dan vandag se nuus, maar moenie weggaan nie.
Communique exists to serve feed and food producers.
On the 1st of December, Agbiz held their Media Day themed Searching for Green Shoots in 2023. Plaas TV attended this event and we spoke to Wandile Sihlobu, Theo Boshoff and Wolf Brody to get their perspective on this.
South Africa, we tend to be in a quite unique period when you think about fertilizer and some of these agrochemicals. Because as you all know, we are importing about 80% of the 2.2 million tons of fertilizer that we use each year.
Yeah, the agribusiness confidence index is a composite index, which means that we have a number of sub-indices that talk to turnover, net operating income, employment conditions, agribusiness conditions, economic conditions, just to try to assess the health of these businesses and the agribusiness in general. We've had a period of about 2 to 3 years of actually the sentiment really positive in the sector, and that was reflected even if one looks at the growth numbers of the sector, where GDP for agriculture has expanded notably in 2020 and 2021. But what we see in the fourth quarter of this year is that the sentiment is starting to be a bit pessimistic, having dropped by 4 points and for the first time below a 50 neutral point. at 49. We use a 50 neutral point when we look at this confidence to say anything below that, it suggests that there is growing pessimism in the sector. Anything above that is what we all want to see. So that's what we saw in the 10 sub indices that we measure. About 7 of them actually painted a downbeat mood, while the others shown a bit of improvement, but overall the sentiment is not looking good. The points differ, but I would say if we were to look broadly to say what was underpinning this decline in confidence, it's issues like the prolonged load shedding, higher input costs. Those are some of the key issues, and of course municipalities that are malfunctioning across the country, growing levels of protectionism in some of the countries that we are exporting to, as well as the difficulties in the logistics industry, speaking to poor roads, ports, and also the functioning of some of the railway line. Those are some of the issues that we would say at a top level are underpinning this decline in confidence. And of course, some are worried even about the weather conditions, that we could even see more disruptive rain at this time around. The sentiments can be improved by a number of things, but I think at the core, if we were to deal with animal diseases by strengthening our biosecurity as a country, deal with the malfunctioning of the municipalities to say how do you strengthen the municipalities across South Africa, and also then deal with the issues around of saying how do you support the blended finance that has already started at the Land Bank, enlarge that, implement the master plan in its comprehensiveness, because it speaks to some of the issues that the sector is challenged with, and even at a more granular level, at a commodity level, the good folks at BFAP, NAMC and the others did amazing work on actually making sure that they captured the issues of the sector. If we can begin to implement those, I think the sentiment to a certain extent could change, and we could see investments also coming in the sector. And I think all of that is important for long-term growth of South Africa's agricultural economy.
Syngenta, bringing plant potential to life.
Goeiedag, beeskarkaspryse het in week 48 van die jaar redelijk konstant gebly en die A2 en C2 karkaspryse het onderskeidelik net met 0.1 en 0.2% afgeneem van die vorige week. Speenkalfprys het egter week op week met 0.1% toegeneem. Wat skaap en lamvleis aanbetref, het lam A2 karkasse se prys week op week met 2.8% gestyg, en hierdie is 'n baie normale styging soos wat ons aanloop na Kersfees toe. C2 prys het ook met 3% week op week toegeneem, terwyl die speenlamprys met 0.4% gedaal het. Varkvleis styging bietjie minder skerp as die vorige weke, maar weer eens 1.2% duurder. Was geen wolveilings hier aangesien het, of bulkar nie, aangesien het reeds gesluit is vir die seisoen. Grane aanbetref het die versterking van die rand redelik druk geplaas op die markte. Geelmieliepryse is 3.9% af week op week. Koringprys 0.8% af, sojabone 0.4% af in prys, terwyl sonneblom 0.9% goedkoper geword het. Wisselkoers aanbetref het die rand week op week met 0.9% versterk teenoor die dollar en met 0.3% versterk teenoor die euro.
Syngenta, bringing plant potential to life.
There's a lot of ifs and buts, but I think it is an innovative way of looking at it. It's trying to make the best of a bad situation, essentially. But I think, again, partnering with Eskom and some of the municipalities who are willing to look at these elements can make a very real difference for those in the agribusiness.
I'm Fiebosov, the CEO of Agriculture Business Chamber, Agbiz. I think looking back at the year, there were big challenges. Some of it sort of macroeconomic challenges, with the purchasing power overseas, especially for exporting industries, not being this year, I think what we predicted with all the instability, etc., taking place. But looking just domestically, most of our challenges, and many of these were captured in the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan. Looking at what our biggest challenges are: energy security, logistics, service delivery. I think on a municipal level as well as on local level with also with the Department of Agriculture and their key regulatory functions. So the way we've approached it this year, and I think maybe some exciting changes that are afoot, is really looking at a collaborative partnership approach. We are in the process now of finalising an interface agreement, so basically an MOU with Transnet, between Agbiz and Transnet, but it is an industry-wide initiative. And essentially what one seeks to do is, we do know that obviously we have got logistic challenges, both on roads, rail, as well as the ports, but looking at it holistically in terms of what is the needs of the sector now, what will the needs be of the sector in roughly 10 to 15 years. It's one of the few sectors in the South African economy which is still growing in terms of volume. We know, of course, other elements like mining with the commodity boom is it's growing in terms of price, but in terms of output, agriculture is one of the few ones that are still growing. So our logistics needs to be catering for that growth. So what the interface agreement seeks to do is set up a number of structures where we can, obviously as an industry association, facilitate getting the specific industries in containerized cargo. So for instance, wine, fruit, where there's refrigerated containers, dry bulk as well, such as grain and wool, lucerne, etc. Mapping out really what is the key logistical corridors, where currently most of it moves on road, of course. Looking at what can feasibly and viably be moved to rail, what storage infrastructure is needed, what intermodal transitional zones are needed, and then all the way into the ports for export specifically, what capacity is needed. We know, for instance, the horticultural sector is going to grow by roughly 30% between now and 2034 in volume terms. Having sufficient capacity ready to handle that will be absolutely vital. So it's exciting, I think, in the sense that we're the only industry so far that has actually entered into an interface agreement with Transnet. So we might be ahead of some of the other industries, and I think it'll serve us quite well to have end-to-end solutions for logistics. Ultimately, of course, it's going to be businesses' decisions. Private companies decide whether or not they invest in, and go this route, get involved in logistics, or whether or not there's logistics companies that might be involved. But from the industry association, if we can just map out what the needs are from the agricultural sector and work closely with Transnet in that regard, then they'll hopefully the tender processes that go out, the public-private partnerships, the investment opportunities will be tailored and suited to what the industry needs. So it's an exciting time, and I do think we've been through the worst patch as far as logistics is concerned. So I think through this interface agreement and a number of other projects that are underway, they were certainly on the the route is up to approve. So with Eskom, it's a challenging one. We all know, of course, the energy crisis that we're in, and on a high level, on the policy level, working through BUSA, there's a lot of work being done to liberalize the energy space, especially to get renewables onto the grid, have this sufficient transmission capacity to cater for that as well. So there we're very much involved with other business organizations, but more specifically, I think just on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of sectors of agriculture which struggle immensely with load shedding, and agro-processing as well, especially when you interrupt the cold chain. And when we do go over sort of stage 3-4 load shedding, it really becomes stop-start. We might have 3 or 4 times load shedding 3 or 4 times a day. So just to look at practical examples, are there other mechanisms in terms of rearranging the load shedding schedule? We would all like to have exemption, but every industry is going to fight for that, and it's no point because we don't have the sufficient electricity. So really just looking at rearranging those so that we do have longer periods of electricity and longer and where there are outages, that they're longer continuous outages, that'll help companies to plan. So it is something that's unfortunately going to be with us, I think, most likely for the next couple of years. So it's good to have those contingency plans in place so that when the grid is energy constrained, at least we can mitigate the impact on the cold chain, on the processing side as much as possible. So there's a number of things we're working on. I mean, the policy, legislation, etc., that is long-term. They come up on an ad hoc basis, and I think it's vitally important. I think maybe sometimes that area doesn't get enough attention. In terms of trade, facilitating trade agreements, opening up new market access for South African products. It's a long-term initiative, but that's certainly a big thing that one has to look at. On the environmental space and from the climate change perspective, it's something that internationally speaking, it's the number one topic, the number one thing affecting agricultural value chains. It's something that South Africa, perhaps with our energy crisis or logistics crisis, hasn't given sufficient attention to. But if we don't act proactively, the rules will most likely be prescribed to us, and then we might be faced with elements such as struggling to access finance, or export markets might implement border tariff agreements. So really the onus, I think, is on the agricultural sector of South Africa to define, or to take the lead rather, to define what is sustainable within a South African aspect, which protects the environment for future generations, but at the same time is achievable for our companies and given our climatic conditions. So there we're again looking for partnerships with consultant companies, with the financial institutions, to try to take the lead actually and be proactive in terms of adapting towards climate change.
That we really do enjoy a very healthy trade balance in agriculture. It's a real blessing. It's been that way for a number of years, and it's something that Agbiz and on my side as Agbiz Fruit Desk are actively seeking to defend and to maintain. My name is Wolf Brody, and I'm the Fruit Desk Manager at Agbiz. That means responsible for all the fruit sector issues within agriculture at Agbiz. We had a good year from a production perspective, and in most of the fruit categories it was a strong year. The harvests were good. We see good growth in the subsectors, and we had good export volumes. In some cases slightly less than expected, but still very strong. And our major problem last year, or this year past, has really been about the logistics. Not the rain, because we had La Nina, so we had good rain, and the floods have been a problem, and then of course the port strike is logistics as well. But the major issue has just been getting products to market, and then of course the other challenge has been rising costs for inputs, and if I can add a third one, the international shipping rate costs. So I'd say logistics and cost structures have been our largest problems, and those have hit a great number of farmers very hard in terms of profitability in the sector. And in many cases you find they really need a good season now to break even. We have a nice set of phytosanitary or SPS, as we call them, breakthroughs in terms of market access for some fruit categories into India. We find that apples, pears, citrus, we've got in-transit cold treatment, which is a nice breakthrough. It means that we can do some of the cold treatment measures on board ship, which will save on cost and time, and greater volume of fruit will get to market and still be good quality. Then we find in the Philippines we've also had some breakthroughs in terms of market access, phytosanitary market access, and we are pushing for fast tracking, getting some of the pome fruit into China, and largely I would say our breakthroughs around SPS measures, but also on the logistics front we've had some very good coordination. In spite of what happened last year and this last 2 years really with logistics, we find that the collaboration between Transnet and the fruit sector has been getting stronger and deeper, and in many cases we find that the industry has been working on an operational level almost daily, weekly on the WhatsApp groups, in the response committees. Participation from Transnet has been very good. And although Agbiz as a whole is engaging with Transnet on a strategic level going forward, and the fruit sector has been very supportive of this and participating fully, we find at operational level where it counts. And so we had a very good operational planning meeting for the grape season in Cape Town, and in Durban the interaction between Citrus Growers Association and the port has been very strong, thanks to the very hard work of logistics teams within the various fruit associations. And the pleasant thing to report is that we find a very good response, positive response from Transnet colleagues. If there were elements perhaps of lack of communication or less than ideal communication, that's been replaced by good collaboration, and very good information flow, joint planning. The two sides are very supportive. They're almost working in sync now to deal with daily, weekly, monthly challenges at the port, which means that we're very hopeful for 2023 that we'll see a better season in the ports for fruit exports. And we need that base because going forward, as I said in the presentation, we've got percentage growth increases over the next 5 years. Some are 5, some are up to 35% or 39% for citrus. We really need to be planning and ready for what's coming in 12, 24, 36, etc. months down the line. And because it's logistics, we can't just turn the switches and now they can transnet overnight. So it's a case of now we stopped sliding backwards, but now we actually have to move forwards.
Ons stel bekend, die nuwe, sterker as ooit tevore, 165 kW Hilux GR Sport.
BKB, die betroubare tuiste van landbou. BKB, die betroubare tuiste van landbou. Elanco, we are driven by our vision of food and companionship enriching life.